The topic is such a critical topic, how to define and implement business leadership in the era of energy transition. There are three big questions that we would like to address tonight. The first is, how can business leaders effectively address and manage the energy transition? Two, what are the opportunities and the risks for businesses? And three, what roles do corporate boards, there's a lot of you corporate boards here tonight in the room, and investors can play in overseeing and encouraging the transition. We have Janet. Welcome back to McGill, Janet. Janet is a McGill MBA grad. Today is the Senior Vice President and Chief Stakeholders Relations Officer at CN, the largest railway operator in North America. And Bertrand Millot, also an MBA grad from McGill, member of ICD, and the head of responsible investing at La Caisse.
Tonight we have 5 different topics we will be covering that are addressing the sustainability, the sustainable leadership.
What the chart is showing you over time are the annual CO2 emissions total in the world. And you see that they've gone up actually quite a bit from 1970 to 2020. Just in 2019, before the pandemic, we were at 35 gigatons of CO2 in the world. Those were directly linked to temperature increase. Okay, so in 2020 we had COVID, we all stayed at home, so that should have brought down the number of emissions. That should have been significant. And there was a little dip, 5%. Problem is, COVID's gone. That's good news, of course, but that means that we're back on now at the pre-COVID level. Keeps growing, and the issue is if we want to reach the net zero targets of the 1.5 degree temperature, well, that's what we need to achieve. We need to achieve an 8% reduction in the level of carbon emissions every single year. Is the 1.5 target a dream, or is that something that we can realistically achieve?
We know that what gets measured gets managed. We also know that setting targets aligned with climate science, I believe, is both right and necessary. This target setting, I think, also sends really important market signals. And if we look at the North American rail industry as an example, the entire Class 1 rail industry has aligned around climate-based targets. And that, to me, really is the beginning point. You need to first understand what you need to do, and you need to tell people what needs to be done. I think as a railway, for us, we don't make the locomotives and we don't make the fuel. So we will not solve this problem alone. So we must believe that we can achieve it. We must set targets aligned to achieving it, and then we must go about doing the business of making it happen.
And you, Bertrand, you have the point of view of a global investor. What do you think about this question? Do you think that the 1.5 target is realistic? So the target is bold, but we need to try to reach it. So we need targets, and companies need strategies and actions that are documented, that are clear with investment plans. We need intermediate targets as well as long-term targets. We need targets for 2025, 2030, maybe even 2023. What do we need to do by the end of this year? We can motivate stakeholders, but societies, companies, and governments have to be aligned.
In your view, what scares you the most about us not getting there to this 1.5? If you had to maybe put your finger on one of the challenges.
I think from the perspective of a railway, we have a 32,000 kilometer outdoor plant. So we are exposed every day already to the impacts of climate change. In the context of flooding, washouts, wildfires, these have direct impacts on our business. They're going to have direct impacts on our ability to insure portions of our business. It touches every aspect of our business today, and I think not doing anything is going to have as if not more significant implications for for how we undertake our business in the years to come.
And you, Bertrand, what is your fear regarding this transition? There are a lot of stakeholders. As investors, we have a different reality. It is easy for us to invest in different firms and to decarbonize our portfolio. But we will not resolve the issue this way, and we will not have decarbonized the planet. So for us, it's not the amount of carbon in our assets, but the quality of carbon, as Janet said. And we want a portfolio that's aligned with energy transition. Many people say we need to decarbonize finance and have greener portfolios. However, this does not have a direct impact on the environment. So these are complex issues.
What you see on this slide, so the message here we want to show you is we have three approaches where we can have an influence on the reduction of emission. We have the behavior changes, we have the technology that are in the market, meaning the technologies that are available today, and we have technologies that are under development. So you see that by 2030, almost 85% of the emission reduction would come from behavior changes and the technology that are currently available. In 2050, there's a shift. It's almost 55%, both again from behavior changes and technology that are available, and a 45% helped by technologies under development. So the key message here is the technology is the main driver. So Janet, my question to you is, how do you deal with this risk to make sure that you're acting enough, fast, but at the same time, you're making sure you're on the right path? And more generally, how are you addressing the trade-off of the long-term aspects of the transition with the pressure that you are having on the short-term performance expectation from your organization?
The industry, in working with our OEMs, will have a convergence of the technology over time. So it's actually really important that we all take on different aspects of that R&D to make the most efficient use of whatever government funding also that we can put into this. In the context of balancing short and long term, to me, this is sustainability. When people ask me, what does sustainability mean to you? This isn't a side piece of the company. This is not a silo. This is the company. And for me, sustainability is really the strategy of how do we meet the needs of the present without compromising our future. As a publicly traded company, it is imperative that we have alignment with our shareholders. And so it's really important for that open and transparent communication with the investor base so that they know where we're going, we understand where they expect us to go, and we kind of get there together.
When we're thinking about the pension funds, we see the world's 300 largest pension funds asset rise to record of 23.6 trillion. So a lot of investment, a lot of capital generation. And at the same time, you read in the National Observer, your pension fund may be taking a gamble with your retirement income.
So when these pension funds are in the game, are at stake, there are some alternatives that are capital intensive. So Bertrand, how do you make sure that the capital is allocated to the right technologies without gambling away your clients' pensions? We have a bit more, over 45 million green assets, and we invest in technologies that need to be developed. We are also very active in Montreal, and we promote carbon reduction on a global level with technologies that exist. And regarding technologies that represent a higher risk, we try out.
Who is going to invest in a technology that isn't viable commercially? That would be gambling. public policy's role in order to develop these things and take away the risk, it's an important role. And this is true of copper, cement, steel, all the building blocks of the economy. Public policy has to get on this case, or otherwise we'll never make it.
An academic study that speaks about what it takes to decarbonize freight. Let's go back to transportation. And it says that if you want to decarbonize freight, there's 5 things that you need to aim for. 1, reduce the demand for freight transportation. 2, optimize vehicle use and loading. 3, increase the efficiency of the freight vehicles. 4, reduce the carbon content of the fuel used to transport the freight. And 5, and Janet, you've referred to it, shift the freight from low carbon intensity to low carbon intensity modes. Every symbol is a different freight mode. So you see road freight is in orange, in circles or in triangles, and then you see little red crosses. That's the rail freight. And it's actually quite striking how much more efficient rail freight is. But when we think about all these dimensions, that also tells us that measuring performance is actually incredibly hard. 1, we need data all across the board. 2, since the new technology is not fully there yet, we can't expect the performance gains to be linear. We'll probably have jumps when the new technology comes in, nonlinear gains, when the future tech becomes ready. And 3, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier, which is in economics known as the Jevons paradox, which is the more efficient you are, the more business comes your way. How do you measure performance? How do you convince the stakeholders that you're making progress from one year to the next, even though the new technology hasn't arrived yet?
So as we're thinking about data and SAP and data security, we have to think about sustainability metrics at the same time. And we have to kind of all bring these connections into one another. But it's so critical to have that data in order to make the progress. And we have to realize the KPIs themselves will need to evolve over time. And this is why how you disclose, the clarity with which you disclose, the alignment with your investor base and other stakeholders is so critical.
You invest in different fields. You invest in hundreds of other companies, Apple, Cirque du Soleil, Johnson & Johnson, Amazon, gold mines. So you have all these different companies in your portfolio, but how can you measure their relative progress or their position and compare them? So we can't just compare, for instance, a company like CN. You can only compare CN with another railway or a pharmaceutical company with another pharma company. This is important because you can only compare comparables. You know, who is doing the right thing, who is not doing the right thing in terms of carbon emissions, protection of the environment, relations with indigenous peoples. We have to be able to measure these things. And it's hard to understand, and we're far from a situation where all these companies are honest and transparent in their disclosure. So we have to educate ourselves. It means we have to have systems. We need international organizations for disclosure. We're trying with the tools we have in hand, but nothing is perfect.
So what we'd like to share in the next page, it's a study from November 2021 that was provided by PwC and the Conference Board Effectiveness. So they were asking what the percentage of executives are understanding. Are they understanding very well or somewhat well some of the topics? So we're talking about strategy, the key business risk, the shareholder, the competitive market, and also the executive compensation. And so board directors feel comfortable, very comfortable when we're talking about these topics. So when we're moving to other topics like technology, human resources, crisis management, cybersecurity, data security, data protection, and ESG, we have a much different pictures, less than 40%, and when we'll come to ESG, it's 30%. So corporate boards feel less comfortable to understand not that well the climate, the ESG globally and the climate risk. out of 1,188 directors at the 100 biggest US company, just 6% had relevant credentials in environment protection, and only 0.3% had expertise in climate or water-related issues. My question to you is, how much of your board is discussing this, and what are you discussing with your board?
So I think the interest and momentum around this has significantly increased in the last 18 months. Our board did undertake a restructuring of their committees, so we now have a governance, sustainability, and safety committee. But a big focus has been on really just talking about the issues. So building up the board capacity, board education. Part of that has been management coming and presenting more frequently, but we've also been bringing in outside expertise as well to help educate our board about the climate issues, climate risks, opportunities, physical risks, transition risks, so that they have a better understanding of the issue and are better positioned to undertake their oversight role and question management about whether or not they're doing the right thing.
Bertrand, on your side, with your experience, you sit on a number of boards, and having many companies in CDPQ's portfolio, what are the best practices you could recommend to board members? There should be debates. There's the task force on financial disclosures. This is a framework, and people say, well, that's very hard to implement that. But, you know, you don't want to perceive this as if you're putting the bar 10 feet high. No, it's just the idea of using it as a guide. The board has to be properly educated, we mentioned this, but the message has to be sent clearly to senior management that these questions are not something that concerns one department sending an engineer to measure what's coming out of your chimney. No, this concerns the entire company across the board, top to bottom.
So we also have to take into consideration the data, the quality of the data, the availability of the data, the processes, and where the company is in its journey of ESG. So following these new KPI that are making their way in our executive compensation, Janet, I will turn to you and ask you, how much importance should we give them? What's the appropriate weight? Is it 5%, 10%, 20%? Should it be linked only to the STIP, the short-term incentive compensation, and the long-term compensation? And what is your experience so far? You've put such a program in place. What has worked well regarding this executive compensation in your company?
We have made changes to our short-term incentive compensation. We have 70% that is financial targets with 3 key metrics embedded on that side. Of the remaining 30% of the short-term incentive target, we have 10% that is related to safety. We're an operating company. And of the remaining 20%, we split that evenly between customer satisfaction, employee engagement, and fuel efficiency, with the fuel efficiency being our proxy for GHG emissions.
There needs to be short-term and long-term components regarding the company's target. It has to be reasonable and it has to be material, because if the CEO has a 2% compensation, it's not tangible, and that CEO might not care about it. And as Janet said, this has to be applied not only to the CEO, but to all senior management members. And the way we integrated that in the Caisse de Dépôt, we have long-term targets that are public, and we have intermediate targets, and we have a compensation plan that is public and clear.
The more we risk diluting the performance components and potentially promoting greenwashing managers who may not be financially performing but can hide under doing well under one of those metrics. And you spoke about that, Bertrand, already, about the types of metrics and the number of them. But if I were to elaborate a bit further and delve here, what should we do if we go in that direction to avoid falling into a situation where we provide fertile ground for greenwashing and potentially having companies that stop performing?
You know, I like to think of a concept of parent and child metrics. And there's more things maybe that come under the child if you've picked your right parent metrics in the right way. And these will tie, and they should tie to strategy. But I would say do your best to be selective about the ones you use, where you're at in your journey, and make every effort to make them as numeric as possible. In my experience, boards prefer not to use discretionary judgment in terms of management compensation, so do as much as you can to make them objective and quantifiable.
We need more accountability from boards so that we know what's necessary, because it has to be necessary, and we need measures that will actually change things. So we are not there yet. We still see many initiatives that lack ambition, but things will change. And especially if we have a CEO or senior management that is very good at financial profitability, but that is not very good at governance. And in this case, we need to enhance the compensation plan so that the senior management team adapts their strategy. So let's bring an incentive to this team so that they adapt their strategy.
Suzanne, Janet, Bertrand, thank you. Merci pour cette belle discussion.